Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on the issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Out Front. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. Good Friday to everyone. Literally good Friday. Hope everyone has a great weekend after the show today. I'm going to start off just with a bit of news here. The Russian embassy in New Delhi is now negotiating food sales from India due to emptying grocery stores in Russia. According to Indian media, the first shipments are leaving in June to go to Russia. Apparently Russia's running out of some basics like sugar, and the Russian embassy listed a long list of things that food they want to buy, and they say that Russia's running out of these things. And I just want to point out here that the news article I was reading in English, but from India, had all these quotes from all these Indian retailers say, "Yeah, we'd love to sell our stuff to Russia. Yeah, we'd love to sell more stuff." And this whole thing from Biden and NATO in the West, the sanctions on Russia were supposed to isolate Russia. Instead, they're strengthening trade ties between BRICS countries, specifically Russia and India in this instance. So I just want to lead off with that because it seems like this is counterproductive in some ways for the West. All right, guys, listen, today I'm talking about soft power. The importance of soft power and grand strategy, and how you have both of them, and you must wield soft power. And I hope I'm going to hurt some feelings on the show today. As a matter of fact, I hope some people rage quit and stop watching this show, because then that lets me know they're just not ready to hear this stuff. All right. In many cases, soft power is stronger than hard power. You have to gain the ability to exercise and deploy soft power, not only, well, really specifically for us in your neighborhood or in your area. And if you cannot do that, then you will lose. Let's slaughter a sacred cow here. I hear a lot. People say, well, I'm trying to start a neighborhood watch, or I'm trying to start an area preparedness network, and I can't because no one will listen to me, or no one will follow me, or nobody's interested. And the problem with that is an excuse. And what happens when people offer that excuse is they say, well, I'm going to bury my head in the sand. I'm just going to try to do this alone. I'm just going to try to do everything myself, or they just give up, right? That is the ultimate black pill, that our situation is hopeless, that we are helpless, that we're powerless. That is not the case. And I apologize if some of my takes on things give you that impression. That is not true. I think we're going to win. It is going to be a decade plus, maybe a generational fight. Some people should be prepared to acknowledge that they will probably not live long enough to see ultimate victory, but I do think we will win. It will happen. Now, from time to time, I see the sentiment that someone says, well, I'm doing all I can. I'm doing all I can. I'm putting my neck out on the line, and no one drops what they're doing and follows me, right? I saw that on a tweet today on Twitter from someone, and I'm not even meaning to call him out. I've been wanting to talk about this for some time, and it just so happens that today's the day I get to do it. There's a book, and I'm going to recommend this book to the person that I'm referencing, and also to you. There's a book by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership. And I jumped on the Jocko bus several years ago when that book came out. And if you read that book and apply the principles, it will probably change your life. It absolutely changed my outlook on the future, my outlook on what's going on. Ultimately, the summary of the book is everything's your fault. And I know that sounds extreme. The book is called Extreme Ownership. But the mindset that the book puts you in is that everything is your fault. You can only control two things in your life: your thoughts and your actions. And that's it. You can't control anything else. You can have influence over some things, but those are the only two things you can control. So, what this book does is it reframes your mindset from reactive to proactive thinking. So, reactive thinking is life happens to me. Oh, I was late to work today because there was bad traffic, and I had no control over the traffic, and this thing just happened to me, and that's the situation that I'm in. And you may say, "Well, I have no control over the situation." Well, yeah, you literally don't have control of the situation. You have control over you, and you could have left 15 minutes early and been to work knowing that there's traffic in the morning when you go to work. And that's proactive thinking. And when you shift to that mindset, you happen to life. Life doesn't happen to you, you happen to it. So if you have been struggling to start a preparedness network, then let's reframe this problem. If no one will follow you, that's a personal problem, right? That's a you problem. That's not a them problem. Why do people not follow you? Maybe because they don't trust you or they don't know you well enough. Okay, that's something that you can have some control over. Be a more trustworthy person or exhibit your trustworthiness. Maybe people don't think that you have legitimacy, and that's also a you problem. How can you express legitimacy? How can you build some kind of legitimacy and authority? Right? Robert Cialdini, in his book called Influence, talks about all these principles. Maybe we'll talk about that next Friday. But the beauty of this mindset goes from, I can't do this, and because it's everyone else's fault, you go from that to I can't do this because I'm doing something wrong. And when everything's your fault, you put yourself in the driver's seat to change things. And when you start to change things, you start to see better results. So it's called Extreme Ownership. Absolutely fantastic book, phenomenal book. If you intend to be a leader at any capacity, I don't care if you're trying to lead yourself out of a wet paper bag, you need to read that book. It's going to help. All right. It's going to help you develop soft power, which is what I want to talk about. So soft power is the ability to influence others, and that can happen through persuasion. Most often happens through moral authority. People act out of intrinsic motivation. They say, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. And I want to be on the right side of history or whatever, right? It's tongue in cheek, but they say, this is the right thing to do. And I don't care how difficult it is. I don't care what the consequences are. I'm going to do it because it is the right thing to do. Clearly, not everyone can do that, but good leaders can help develop that intrinsic motivation in followers. And that's one thing you need to be doing, is developing that kind of intrinsic motivation. Good leaders provide purpose, direction, and motivation. That's what we said in the Army. Purpose. Here's what you're doing, and here's why. Here's why doing this is going to help you. It's going to benefit the group. It's going to benefit you or your family. But that's direction. So purpose, direction, motivation. Direction. They need to know a starting point. They have to be equipped for success. They have to be set up for success. And motivation is, if we can accomplish this, whatever it is, if it's putting in a new gate or planting a community garden, going to a medical class, if we do this, then we'll be better set up to react or respond to future events, or to anticipate future events and prepare for them. So, soft power is critical. If you are going to be a leader, you must have soft power. Now, hard power, on the other hand, is coercion and violence. And people do things because they're going to be punished, or because they fear you, or they fear what you are going to do to them. And people talk about Machiavelli a lot, right? Machiavelli said, quote, "It is better to be feared than loved." And for most people, that's where the sentence ends. But that's actually not the quote. Machiavelli actually said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." So ideally, you want to be feared and loved, according to Machiavelli. And he was a political theorist, so not entirely, the best analogy for our situation. However, being loved is soft power. That's having moral authority. That's having people, you've probably heard soldiers say in the past that uh, I would go through hell for Captain so and so, right? You get back from a deployment, and the officer at whatever level has proved himself. The men love that guy, and that is leadership, right? That's soft power. People are not doing things because they fear him; they're doing things because they love him. That's where we have to get. So once you have turned the corner on this, then we need to start discussing grand strategy, which is the main topic for today. Now, I'm not a grand strategist, but I have read some John Boyd. And this is applicable, grand strategy is applicable at the strategic level. So when we're talking about nation states, like what's the grand strategy of Russian sanctions on the West, or excuse me, from the West on Russia? It was the Biden and NATO and Eurozone, most of the Eurozone, they want to isolate Russia, turn Russia into a pariah state, turn Russia into the next North Korea. No one wants to do anything with Russia. No one wants to trade with Russia. No one wants to be associated with Russia. And that's not happening. So if that was the whole grand strategy, it is failing. And I'll make that point right here, because the most important thing to understand from John Boyd about grand strategy is that it is the effort to connect yourself to as many lines of support, or to as many lines, or connect yourself to as many power centers as possible, while simultaneously disconnecting your opponent or your adversary, your enemy, from as many power centers as possible. And if that is grand strategy, the United States is not doing that right now. They are allowing Russia to strengthen their lines of support, or strengthen their connections to power centers such as China and India and Brazil. And I don't even think South Korea is necessarily worth, or excuse me, I don't even think South Africa is necessarily worth mentioning, but they are the fifth BRICS country. What we are seeing is ties strengthening between BRICS, not deteriorating. This is another reason why I'm very concerned about U.S. leadership and grand strategy here with the world, because it's not happening. Let's take this global picture of grand strategy here, and let's look at it at the national level here, mainly between the political left and the political right. Because what I'm seeing is that the left does have a grand strategy. They have been able to obtain total authority, almost total authority over culture, the political mainstream, the establishment. They have infiltrated institutions. They have subverted institutions, taken power. These are the power centers that the left, more broadly, is connecting itself to. The left is absolutely connecting itself to as many power centers as possible, while also reducing the amount of connections that the right has to these power centers. And Twitter is a really great example. Elon Musk said, "Hey, I'll come out and buy Twitter," and you can see the establishment, the media, they're all freaking out. They say, "Well, we can't allow a billionaire to own a social media platform." It's not that the left can't lose Twitter. They can lose Twitter. They still will have massive amounts of surface area to deploy their own soft power. They cannot cede that space to the political right. They cannot cede Twitter to the right, because that would be allowing the right to connect itself to a power center. That goes against the left's grand strategy. This is why Twitter, okay, it's not super important, but it does matter. It is a power center where lots of people share information. And as long as the powers that be at Twitter, the Twitter board or the Twitter shareholders or whoever, can come out and say, whoever has influence at Twitter, the 26-year-old pink-haired whatever that individual is over at Twitter, can say, yeah, I don't really like what this guy's saying, bloop, delete. It's a power center. One major failing on the right that I see is that we do not have a grand strategy. Not that I'm aware of. And if we do, it looks nothing like what the left has been doing, which has been incredibly successful. Not in all cases, but in many cases. If the right did have a grand strategy, there would be a mass. Now, listen, Project Veritas is a really great example of a heavy hitter, right? The things that they do, the leaks that they're able to get out to the public to show how corrupt and how evil some of these corporations and organizations are. This is a really great example of counter infiltration, where Project Veritas goes out and they infiltrate these left-wing institutions and expose them for what they are. Also, the left has been very good. I mean, 2020 is a great example of organizing, organizing for these massive nationwide protests and riots. You're able to get millions, or maybe 10, I don't know, tens of millions, a few million to tens of millions of people out in the street, in some cases, night after night after night. You look at Portland, had what, 120 or 150 days of rioting or something like that. There has to be a level of counter organization on our part. If you look at this in terms of phases, you have to understand, organize. First of all, there's a reason why community organizing, it's not a hobby, it's not recreational. Community organizer is a paid position in a lot of these left-wing organizations for a reason, because organization is the first phase of what they are planning. And so at a certain level, there has to be counter organization. There has to be similar counter organization. So, we look at things and how the left is able to move Overton's window and make things that were outrageous 10 years ago now make them commonplace. And that's because they've been able to organize and deploy soft power and push Overton's window to the left. There's not really been a lot of counter organizing. At least I haven't seen on the right. Now, for us, what this means in our local community, look, there are probably local battles on a school board or on a city council. You run into the exact same problem, right? The political left and political right vying for power, trying to use soft power, trying to recruit voters, because that's how victory is kind of expressed, is using democracy, to using voters to go out and vote for political parties and put them into power, right? That's kind of the end goal here. But on the tactical level, we have to start thinking like this. How can you use grand strategy locally in your school board, or politically, socially, and economically? How can you use grand strategy to get people in your group, or get people on your side connected to as many power centers, and disconnect the other side from as many power centers as possible? That would be local use of grand strategy. And typically that's going to be something more like that happens in politics more than anything. One of the most important things that the socialist left has going for them right now is this concept of dual power. In you go back into socialist literature and socialist doctrine, and they talk about dual power. And dual power is not just electoral politics. They say you also have to build, so there's electoral political power, but there's also social power. And the social power is what it enables them to organize and mobilize people on voting day, or to get out and protest. And, in a lot of the cases, this is just like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or whatever, where the people who will go out and cause a ruckus and make a scene, they're able to get massive political concessions, even from some people, even from Republicans or some people on the right. It's absolutely incredible how they do this. And my point is, I'm just not seeing a lot of this stuff on the right. And if it is being done, it's typically been demonized. And I think that's just another indicator to show you that if there's no attempt to counter organize, if there is no attempt to build and implement and deploy your own grand strategy, either at the national level or the local level, then you're going to lose. Historically, that's what happens, is that you lose. So at a local level, the first thing we have to do to understand, and this is why I brought up leadership and soft power, is everyone has to understand the mission. And one reason why I think an area preparedness network is great is because a lot of these people vote. And if we can have a group of people come together and say, okay, we're going to advocate for our own interests, we are going to do everything we can to build political, social, and economic power locally, to do as much good as we can through that, to prevent as much bad as we can through that, then we can make a dent, and we can probably insulate ourselves somewhat from the stuff that's creeping out of DC or LA or your state capital or wherever you are. And that's the first step. That's absolutely the first step to, people talk about taking back the country and, politically and socially and culturally. And that's absolutely the first step if it can be done. And I'm not saying that it can be done, but I kind of go back to this whole concept of if the United States is going to deteriorate into a third world country, and in some areas it was. I just saw the other day where what's some of these gangs in LA now they're sending people out to go rob rich people. And it was over in the LA Times, and I forget exactly what it said. And honestly, I didn't even read the article here. But I just look at that stuff and I'm like, man, that's stuff from Latin America. Like you would expect that to happen in Brazil or a lot of the countries in Central America. And I think that's more than anything probably indicates that parts of LA have descended to the same third world zone that you would see in the favelas of Brazil or see in these urban areas in Central America. And so it is concerning. But if that's our key assumption that the United States is going to slowly deteriorate into the third world as the American empire ends, then the only solution is make sure that you can build a first world zone. And I forgot what day I talked about that, but I said that recently. We got to live in first world zones, even if the country around us is deteriorating. And building this political, social, and economic power is going to help us to do that. If we aren't building dual power, political and social power, then we are ceding that playing field to our opponents. And we just really can't afford to do that. So I recently discovered, unfortunately, that Robert David Steele passed away. He was a former CIA operations officer. He made a lot of contributions to intelligence, specifically in the field of open source intelligence. He was out there on some things that would be politically and socially unpalatable to repeat, especially later in life. And I won't defend those ideas. I'm not also going to denigrate him, other than I really want to say his positive contributions, I think, outweighed everything else. He described the 7 tribes, and this is so important to understand. He described what he calls 7 tribes of national power. Typically, we think about national power is an acronym called DIME. D, the instruments or elements of national power. DIME, diplomatic, information, military, and economic. And this is, he really kind of expounds on this, but his 7 tribes of national power gets a little more granular than DIME. And here's what he wrote of the following. This is what he said the 7 tribes were. Number 1 is government, military, law enforcement, business, academia, non-governmental organizations, and the media, and the civil sector. Things like labor unions, religion, and society. And so if you go down that list and you just do a rough estimate of which political or social side, political or social right or political or social left, is in charge or has the most power or the most influence within these 7 tribes, okay, government, military, law enforcement, and I know a lot of these things it's difficult just to apply a blanket characterization of everything because they're so broad. The United States is not only is it geographically complex, it's also highly social and politically complex. And, law enforcement in California is not going to be the same as law enforcement in, I don't know, central Nebraska somewhere. But government, military, law enforcement, business, okay, woke capital, ESG, academia, gone. Non-governmental organizations and the media, almost all of them lean to the left at least, and that's being generous. And the civil sector, labor unions, religion, and society. One of the things that concerns me the most is, the church used to be a conservative institution. The Chamber of Commerce and business used to be a more conservative institution. The Boy Scouts is a really good example of infiltration and undermining of what was a conservative institution. That's not everybody, but if you're the left, you simply cannot have an organization dedicated to churning out generations worth of self-reliant, confident, capable, cis, hetero, gender, whatever they are, uh, young men into society. You can't have that happen. That's why the Boy Scouts was targeted, and I would say decimated. They're past decimated now. So I say all this to say the point is, if we don't have a grand strategy, and this really starts at the local level, if we don't have a grand strategy at the local level, we're not going to have one at the state level. And if we don't have one at the state level, then we're not going to have one at a national level. So everything starts locally. And that's actually where you do have all the power. You absolutely do have power and influence at the local level. So I don't want anyone to think, well, just take the ultimate black pill and say, well, we're powerless, we're helpless, I can't do anything, I can't change Congress, I can't change what happens in the White House, I can't change what happens in Russia or Ukraine. You can change what happens at your next city council meeting or your next county commission meeting or whatever you have locally. You can go out and start knocking on doors, talking about all the things that your school board is trying to do. And I know this because we've seen this happen all across the country, specifically a massive thing, Chris Rufo in Virginia getting, I think he was, I don't want to say single-handedly because there's a lot of people involved, but all this anti-CRT stuff that Chris Rufo is doing is a really great example of counter-organizing. Organizing Americans who are tired of that stuff. They just want their kids to go to school and learn reading, writing, and math and history. And this thing in Florida is another really great example of counter-organizing to get stuff done. And this has to be the future. If you want to carve out a first world zone in a third world country, if you want to make sure, if you want to, if you want to have some level of influence over the future, you simply have to be doing this stuff. And if you don't have a grand strategy and you don't have soft power, it's going to be wielded against you. And you simply cannot afford to cede that kind of battlefield to these other people. So listen, this is my talk for Friday. Listen, I try to every Friday, I know I've only been doing this for a few weeks, but on Fridays, I try to get away from the news and let's talk about real stuff, man. Let's talk about things that you can actually do to empower you, to build a game plan, to start moving ahead, to start getting things done. And that's every Friday. So listen, if you got something from this, here's what I ask you to do. Share this with a friend. Share this video with a friend or post it on social media. And we have to get this mindset out to people that, we're not helpless and we're not we're not automatically going to lose. We will if we don't do anything. And so this is my talk on soft power, grand strategy, and why you're going to lose if you don't have either of those two things. By the way, before I get to some questions, I'm just going to end this with a quick housekeeping note. I'm not going to be back on the show on Monday, but I will be back in the driver's seat on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central. I hope to see you there. All right, Ben, what do we have here for some questions? Let's see, M6, a bunch of numbers. Why do you think it's important that Russia places nukes on the Finnish border? Yeah, so I've seen where people say there are already nukes in Kaliningrad, and I think the Lithuanians say, well, we don't know for sure, but we believe that. And part of it is, part of it maybe was just to make headlines by the Russians to say, well, we're going to move borders, we're going to move nukes into the Baltics. Well, that's if they've already had nukes there, it's not a big deal. But the Finnish border is not Kaliningrad. And so if they're talking about moving mobile launch systems to that to the Russian Finnish border, then yeah, that is a new thing. And if you're Finland, that is an escalation, and it's probably all the more reason to join NATO at this point. So that's the distinction there between Kaliningrad and the Finnish border. All right. Let's see. How is it possible that large numbers of Ukrainian troops are running out of food, ammo, given the amount of money and ATM or in munitions, I guess, the U.S. has provided? Corruption, mismanagement? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's probably a better question for Dustin because I don't live on these. I mean, I don't live on Russia, Ukraine. I don't pay as much attention to it as he does. But yeah, corruption could be to blame. The other thing I know that Russia has been striking some of these munitions depots, and so some of that stuff could be getting blown up. As soon as it gets stored, and so that that's probably another reason why if the Ukrainians are running out of munitions, uh, although we're supplying them, uh, the other thing is a lot of some of those munitions may just not have reached the majority of those munitions may not have just have reached Ukraine yet. So maybe that's another reason why. What are your thoughts on platforms like Mastodon, which are decentralized? Is there any path for something like that to be adopted to bypass single power centers? Yeah, I know a lot of the crypto bros and the Web3 guys have said, the solution is not to put Elon Musk in charge of Twitter. The solution is actually to have decentralized social media platforms where it doesn't matter who's in charge. And I think that's a fair point. I think, in terms of decentralized, if you are, if you're Ukraine and you don't want your domestic communications networks to go down just because a server farm was destroyed or just because there's a Russian cyber attack, then yeah, if you do have a decentralized social media platform, then it's going to be more difficult to take down because you can't take it down in one single strike. So I think that is, uh, I think that's a strength. But again, you go back to the network effect, right? Why are so many people on Facebook? Because that's where everyone else is. Why are people on Twitter? Because that's where a lot of the people who matter are on. They're on Twitter. So that's another reason why you look at Gab and let's see, Gab and Truth Social and whatever these other things that these people have created. That's Gab bills himself as like the ultimate free speech space, and I think Gab's basically like a dumpster fire for the most part. But yeah, you can pretty much say, unless you break the law, you can pretty much say whatever you want to on Gab, and people do. So one reason why those platforms haven't taken off is because the people just aren't there. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem for competing platforms. Like the hat, where is it available? All right. This is an Ex Umbris Designs hat. You can go over to their website, Ex Umbris UMBRIS, Ex Umbris Designs. If you Google it and you get close enough, you'll probably find it. Yeah, that's Ex Umbris Designs. And by the way, they sent me this hat for free. I thought it was a cool hat, so I really appreciate that. And they didn't have to, but they did. That's super cool of them, so I appreciate that. Do you have any recommendations on guides to understanding state, local governments for folks that don't know the ins and outs of politics? Yeah, I would say start off. I don't know about any guides, but look, almost every county in this country's got to have a Democrat and Republican party of something of the county. I would start there. If you're a Republican, and I would say even go to your Democrat political meeting and just sit in there and introduce yourself or whatever, and just listen to what these people have to say. I wouldn't just restrict myself just to going to the Republicans. Also, there's a couple of websites like meetup.com is one. Hop on meetup.com, search your county or your city and just see what public meetups are there. You're going to find all sorts of stuff. Like, there's going to be a Lego builders meetup or, I don't know, whatever people are meeting up to do, a beer drink and a trivia meetup, but there may be political or social meetups there that you might want to check out. So I think that's a good place for that. I don't have a guide, but there are websites like, is it Ballotopedia or Ballotpedia or something like that? That'll show you kind of the layout of in most cases, your state, or I guess in all cases, your state politics. And I don't know if they have more local races or not, but there's a bunch of websites out there that'll do that. That's where I would start. For those looking to organize in their area and take back power, where or how should they start so as to perform a solid community assessment? Okay, if you're doing a community assessment, I mean, look, there's a thing called PMESI. Well, okay, look, a solid community assessment. You're going to accomplish this in your area study. That's why everybody should do an area study. Um, the A few of the things I would look at locally to do a community assessment is going to be politics. It's going to be social. So, who are the influencers in your area? Um, do like threat and crime. What's the security situation like? Look at the infrastructure situation. Is there clean water? Does the water have lead in it? Uh, where do people get their power from? Their water, sewer, so on and so forth. I mean, that's kind of a quick, down, dirty assessment you can do. The other thing is, um, oh, there's another acronym, and it's right. Hang on, if you'll give me 2 seconds, I'll remember it. Okay, maybe I won't remember in 2 seconds. But listen, maybe we can talk about it next Friday. I can do a whole show on stuff like that. And listen, I'm seeing a couple of things here in the comments, like, oh, people suck, and oh, people have their head in the sand, and they're untrustworthy, and all that stuff. Listen, the people are out there. There are people out there who are just as frustrated as you are, and they want to do something about it. And it's going to take some leadership. It's going to take you getting out of your comfort zone, or maybe you're an E5 in the army, and you're going to have to flip back through, and some people are uh flip back through your notes on leadership and just go do it. So that's um in terms of people sucking, yeah, some people do. So um you got to just find the ones that don't and move forward. Jared says April 23rd to 25th, Texas is not taxing emergency supplies. What's going to happen? Yeah, that happens every year. There's like a storm preparedness week or something like that, emergency preparedness week. And yeah, you don't have to pay sales tax on these supply items. It's just like the going back to school sales, right? It's like, oh, this week only, don't pay sales tax on school items. And there you go. But it's in Texas and it's for emergency supplies. Happens every year. All right, let's see. Ben, you got anything else here? I'm going through here. Is it better to try and gain more comprehensive political influence in rural areas or lesser influence in urban areas? Uh, listen, I think that's the wrong way to frame it. The correct way to frame it is gain influence anywhere you can. But I do recognize the duality in that rules made in the city apply to the whole county, for instance, or in the rules made in the state capital apply to the whole state, right? I mean, that's a fundamental problem of California, of Oregon, Washington. You have these massive mega cities, a handful of these mega cities dictating the state's entire politics. So, I mean, I do sympathize with that. For a lot of people, like, you're just not going to be able to wield massive political power in a city that's like 70-30 Democrat. It doesn't mean that you can't compete. So in terms of honestly, I think the best thing you can do is at the county level, just make sure you're electing good county leadership, and then you're holding them accountable, because there are a lot of people like Dan Crenshaw who got elected and had a bunch of people fool, like, yeah, man, Dan, former SEAL, solid dude. He's gonna get into DC and he's gonna fight for us and he's gonna be great for Texas. And like, literally, it's one of the worst people Texas two's ever elected. Like, just bring back Ted Poe, man. All right, so yeah, that's a good question. I would just say do an assessment, and do like return on investment. How much effort and how much money is going to be required to have political power at a certain level, and what are the rewards for that, versus versus maybe doing either or. I don't know, that may be one good way to start. All right, let's see. um okay, so apparently Ben added the Exumbris link to the description here. Should we just recon the local political parties to assess their worldview? Absolutely. Yeah. And listen, I'm not saying that just because you go to the Republican Party means they're going to have anything figured out either. That may just be the good old boys club and they're just out for themselves. And in a lot of places, that's exactly how it is. So, you might not find any more solace going to the Republican committee meetings than you find going to the Democrat committee meetings. So, all right. Oh, cultural husbandry's here. Hank says, for those looking to organize in their area. Oh, yeah. Sorry that he already asked that question. Yeah, good to see you here. Right on. All right, guys, we'll do like maybe one more question here, and then we'll call it a day. All right, Ben, anything? We'll do one more question. All right, awesome. Thanks. It's good to see you here, man. Thanks. All right, yeah, and Kevin brings up a good point. Election season's coming up, so go walk around your neighborhood, start scoping out who has political signs. One of the things I always do when I'm driving through a neighborhood, I look at bumper stickers on cars and I look at flags. American flags, Marine Corps flags, Army flags. I see a bunch of those, and it doesn't mean they're good people, but it means that they probably are. So and frankly, if one of my neighbors started flying a military flag, I'd go introduce myself and talk to him and see what's up. If he's a fellow veteran, maybe he will think like you do. And if he does, then if you're starting out from zero, you've just doubled your size. Where is your training on area studies? All right, listen, there's a website, and if you go to www I don't know why, but you have to type in the www, but www.grayzoneactivity.com. If you go to that website, I have a thing called an area intelligence course. Hey, listen, if people are interested, I'll go. Ben, can you put the areas? I did a video, like a 30-minute video on how to do an area study. Ben, if you can put that in the description as well. If you want to purchase, I have an online course called the Area Intelligence course. If you want to join, you can do that at www.grayzoneactivity.com. All right. Well, I guess that was the last question. So everybody, Dustin will be back on the Daily S8 on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Kevin says the area study courses are well worth your time, folks. Well, Kevin, I appreciate that. And as a reminder, I will not be on the show on Monday at 2 p.m., but I will be back at Tuesday at 2 p.m. So until then, be well and stay out front.